There you are.
Hey, it's Phil Wade from Dalton Wade Real Estate Group. We've got Steve holding the camera and Lisa coughing, but thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about keeping out of trouble. A lot of these training sessions come out of what happens during the week, and we had this issue come up a couple times on the past week, so I thought good to talk about. So, there's always two sides in kind of what we do. There's working with a buyer and then working with a seller. So let's start on the buyer side. So your buyer says, "Hey, I'd like to make an offer." You've showed them the property. The property looks good. Showed them the roof. All those things. But then, what you need to tell your buyer is, "Hey, I need to do a little bit more research for you before we send in that offer." The research isn't all that time consuming. I mean, you've probably run some comps for them, but this is actually then taking the listing and the seller's disclosure and looking to see that it kind of ties out with what's on the public record. The public record is the county that the house is in, tax appraiser's site. So become very familiar with that site. It can help you immensely. So you plug the property into the site, and then what's going to come up is several things. It's going to tell you what the square footage heated is of the house. If that doesn't agree to what's on the MLS listing, you've got to find out from the listing agent why that is, and then same with the total square footage. And where that can come back to bite you is that if let's just say there's an unheated finished porch that the listing agent has decided to put in as living space. That's not living space. That's unheated. That doesn't count. And then what's going to happen is, really, if your client's a cash buyer, then he's purchasing something that's overstated in terms of the square footage. And kind of as the buyer's agent, that's problematic. I mean, it's problematic for the listing agent. It's problematic for everybody involved with the transaction because, that's what we're here to kind of make sure doesn't happen. Now, if your client is getting financing, the appraiser, you can be 100% assured, is going to look on the county record, and he's going to use the county record. He doesn't care what's on the MLS. That's not what they go off of. They're going to go off of what's on the county record, and then you're potentially going to be embarrassed. And your client, is going to have spent money potentially, because the home inspection's already done. They've already done the home inspection, appraisal, maybe survey, and they're going to be out of pocket, anywhere from $600 to $1,000. Not good. It takes 5 minutes to check it. So before okay, I want to put an offer in. That's what your client says to you. Your next response is, okay, I need to check a couple things, and then again, the vast majority of cases, it's going to all tie out. But occasionally you're going to find that there are discrepancies, and then you need to talk to the listing agent and then your client as to kind of exactly what's going on. So that's the square footage. Very, very important. The next one is permits. So there's a lot of unpermitted work that gets done. The seller doesn't want to pay for the permits. They're afraid their taxes are going to go up, and the work gets done, and it's unpermitted. What does that mean? That means depending on what the permit needed to be for. So it's a garage conversion that got turned into a third bedroom. That's a common one. The appraiser is going to go look again on the property tax record, and there is no third bedroom to him. There's only a garage. And I've talked to a couple appraisers. They kind of say a garage is equal in value to a third bedroom. You never know how they're going to call that, but that third bedroom, in the eyes of the appraiser, doesn't exist. And again, if you have a cash buyer, here's where it can become a problem. The cash buyer then thinks they're buying, a 3-bedroom home, and in fact they're buying a 2-bedroom home, and then X amount of time in the future, they go to list and put their house on the market. Oh, I thought it was 3-bedroom, and then a wise listing agent brings that to their attention, and lo and behold, it's a big surprise. Very, it happens more than you think. And again, it's very simple. You just look, and then you've looked at the square footage, and then there's all the permits that have been pulled. So you would want to see that there had been a permit changing the house from having a garage to having a 3rd bedroom. The other thing with permits, and again, half baths, anything that's not permitted to that appraiser, it isn't there. Now, I had a listing just recently that went under agreement, and they put a half bath in and they didn't permit it. But it was disclosed. It was put in the seller's disclosure so that there's no surprise. There's no that buyers thinking they're buying something that's not there. It's disclosed. So again, people, it's you can't help what your clients do, but you need to disclose it. If they have an unheated porch, you're not going to put that in. Half bath, if it's not permitted, you tell them it's not permitted, and you disclose that so that everybody knows up front. And then on other permits, like the roof. Sometimes, I've heard roofing contractors, oh, it's this price if I have to pull a permit. It's this price if I don't. So the seller says, oh. I'll go for the one that's cheaper. I won't get the permit. And then what happens, what does the buyer think? Well, then you tell your buyer, look, we can put an offer in, but I want you to know, the roof isn't permitted. It wasn't permitted. What does that mean? Well, that means nobody came out from, the city or town or the municipality to say everything was done correctly. So again, maybe it was done correctly, maybe it wasn't, who knows? So there's unpermitted items. There's open permits where, they went and got a permit, but then they didn't actually ever close it out. They didn't have the city or town or municipality come and do the final inspection. Kind of the same thing. How was the work done? Was it done correctly? Your client, if they buy that house, they then own that house because it's an as-is contract and they own it as that is. So again, the work wasn't done well. Could be a problem. And then the last one is expired permits. The permit was issued, but again, they never closed it out at all. And then X amount of time went by and it expired and it kind of closed itself, but there was no final inspection. Same thing. How well was that done? What happened? Blah, blah, blah. So things around permits, roofs, air conditioning, half baths, finished, porches turned into, sunrooms turned into finished porches. But, you just want to check and basically, kind of see what's there. It should be on every offer. You should look before you send that offer. Client tells you they want to put an offer in. That's awesome. You tell them and then the next thing is, okay, but before we do that, I just need to check a couple things. I need to just kind of verify, on the permits, and your client will love you and appreciate you for it. So that's kind of the buyer side. And then on the when you're the listing agent, again, you need to do this up front. So before the listing goes live, there's a question on the seller's disclosure. Have all proper permits been pulled, issued, and closed? Again, there may be stuff from before. There may be unpermitted, areas. There may be, again, hopefully we're going. I mean, I had one where they bought the house in 2001. They had an appraisal who sketched out 1,500 or so square feet of living space. You go on the county record, there's 330 square feet missing. It looks like an addition done later. They don't know, nobody knows, and it is what it is, but the is what it is means it needs to be disclosed. You told the buyer that was how it is. They didn't have to sort of then put the house under agreement, do the work, and then find out, that what you marketed wasn't there. It's fine to market it as long as you tell them. So it's called disclosure. We want to make sure if we're listing, everything is disclosed. And then again, kind of the same thing with the permits. You want to look at the permits, see what was pulled, have a discussion with your client. Hopefully they put a new roof on, they got a permit. They put a new AC in, they got a permit. They put a half bath in, then it's easy. It's when, when they haven't done that and they've taken, the shortcut. Again, it's fine, you can still list and sell the house, but you just have to disclose so that there can be, because again, what ends up happening is, the situation, ultimately, both parties, the buyer's agent and the listing agent, are sort of at fault. The buyer's agent didn't, do the homework up front, and the listing agent, basically, did it wrong. And it happens more time. There was one a bit ago where, there was an unfinished or unheated, porch, room that was closed in, and then the appraiser looked and, he used, what was on the tax record, not what was on the MLS. In that case, it all worked out because the seller was willing to give, money off because of it. But sometimes they don't, and then it's a shit show. We don't need that. So again, if you're working with a buyer, check everything up front. It doesn't take long. And if you're working with a seller, check before the listing goes live and make sure everything is proper. So any questions?
There was a question from the folks watching.
Yeah.
It's a little off topic. They were asking thoughts about eminent domain.
Well, eminent domain, it would kind of come in, I guess, in this, so that if there is the potential that, the house is going to be taken by eminent domain, certainly that would need to be disclosed. And again, there's rumor, and then there's, something actually concrete. So rumor, that's harder to disclose. Something that's concrete, certainly,
they already have a buyer.
Well, certainly needs to be disclosed. You wouldn't, and again, all this goes on both sides. You wouldn't, both parties, the listing agent and the selling agent, it becomes a problem, if like it was, out there in the public record that the house was going to be taken by eminent domain, and then, somebody bought that house, and then, that never got picked up. Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay.
Any other questions in Periscope land?
None that I see. No. Here's one. How do we handle a cash transaction on lands? The next step. I lost it. How do we handle a cash transaction on land?
Well, again, you just, Lisa just had a land sale. Maybe she can chat about it.
It's a slightly different contract, so you need to look over the contract. It's simpler, actually. So you give time for due diligence in terms of, checking to see what the setbacks are, what they need to know in terms of building, because you're assuming that they may want to build on that land. So you need to know, is it in a conservation district? What are the building regulations for that area? So you do a feasibility, you give them time for feasibility on that. And the other thing is basically to make sure that there are no wetlands on the property, because that could seriously hamper someone's ability to build. And those are really the two things, but cash kind of works the same way. Cash is cash. So
yeah, it's cash financing. It doesn't really matter because, again, if there's a problem, that's. You don't want somebody buying something that ultimately, they can't sort of do what they want to do with. Meaning, if they want to build, ideally, the person selling the lot already has, the approval to build, right? So that's already done. That's easy. If it's not done, then, ultimately, hopefully during that kind of inspection period, your client's able to satisfy themselves as best they can, that they're going to be able to do, to do what they want with it.
Question was, are inspections and appraisals required? I assume they're still talking about the land?
Well, I mean,
Sure.
an inspection, would definitely be required because, I
It's
mean,
just a different kind.
is it right?
It's not an inspection by a home inspector. You want to give time for your due diligence
Surveyor.
in terms of finding out if there's wetlands on the property, finding out what it's zoned for, and even if it's zoned for, say, multifamily, what are the setbacks there? Because if it's multifamily but the setbacks are 25 feet, does your person really have the ability to build in the way that they want to build, even though the zoning is what they might want it to be? Is the land big enough for kind of that? But the big thing is, are there wetlands is probably one of the biggest things, because that'll prevent you from doing a lot. So zoning, wetlands, building codes, and you can call the building department of whatever town it is, and probably depending on how big the town is, but sometimes they're very, very, very helpful, and they can just answer all of your questions. The survey's mostly just going to give you the boundaries of the property, but you do need to find out, is it a flood zone? They need to know that. So are they going to have to, what is involved in building? But it's not a standard inspection, but it's called a feasibility study. So you're giving time for feasibility.
Especially if they're looking for a variance, that would be a big
Right,
deal.
sure.
Right, I mean,
Okay.
you would, you might make the contract contingent on the variance if the sellers, and again, we didn't really talk about the appraisal, so it works the same way. If it's a cash buyer, they don't need an appraisal. They could put an appraisal contingency in there and have an appraiser come out and tell them what they think it's worth. I mean, that's kind of why they have you as the real estate agent. But if they're getting financed for it, then they would certainly, the lender is going to require an appraisal.
Okay.
Anything else out there?
It was a silly question, but I won't quote it. I think that's
Alrighty.
it.
Thank you so much for tuning in. In summary, please remember, if you're working with a buyer, check that county record before that offer goes in. You're looking to tie out the square footage, and you're looking to kind of verify, the permits. Obviously, if there are no permits, they're hard to verify, but, you're looking for stuff that was done to the house that has a permit. And then if you're the listing agent, you want to do that stuff all up front, disclose it properly, and make your life a lot easier. Thanks for tuning in.